Up next in the broadcast, President Park Geun-hye calls for speedy conclusion of a free trade agreement with Indonesia as she continues her state visit in the Southeast Asian nation. The Obama administration and Republicans continue their debate on how to end their standoff over the government shutdown and the U.S. debt ceiling. Global chemical weapons watchdog organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons wins this year's Nobel Peace Prize amid its work in dismantling Syria's chemical arsenal. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Friday, October 11th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hae.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening in Jakarta, Indonesia, where President Park Geun-hye is in the midst of a three-day state visit.
There, she emphasized the need for a comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Indonesia and toured a local center of a Korean shipbuilding company. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-joo has more on what her so-called sales diplomacy.
It was just last year that Korea and Indonesia set a goal of reaching $100 billion in bilateral trade by the year 2020. President Park, during a business investment forum in Jakarta on Friday, reaffirmed this goal and said the two nations should take specific actions to reach the target. In particular, she emphasized the importance of the two nations signing a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, or CEPA, as soon as possible.
양국 경제의 동반 성장에 기여할 수 있는 다양한 분야의 협력을 포괄해서 상생형 경제 협정의 새로운 모델을 제시하게 될 것입니다.
President Park also put great emphasis on increasing investment. Senior Presidential Secretary for Economic Affairs Cho Won-dong told reporters that as Indonesia mostly sells raw materials to Korea, a free trade pact on goods would not offer much benefit to that country. So he said President Park put forth Korean investment in Indonesia as a selling point for why Indonesia should sign the CEPA with Korea. Later in the day, President Park toured the local engineering center of Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering. The company won bids to export 3 submarines to the Southeast Asian country last December and stands as a model of cooperation between the two nations in the defense industry. Indonesia is currently pushing ahead with a so-called master plan to accelerate economic development by enhancing connectivity between more than 17,000 islands that make up the archipelago. Plans for major infrastructure projects are underway here in Indonesia, and many Korean companies are seeking to participate in them. President Park, as part of her sales diplomacy, will be calling on the Indonesian government to support these companies so they can take part in the national project. Oh Jin-joo, Arirang News, Jakarta.
And moving now to the reunion of a jailed Korean American and his mother in North Korea. The communist regime allowed Kenneth Baes' mother to visit her ailing son, who has been detained in the communist state for 11 months now after being sentenced to 15 years of hard labor.
Many experts see the decision as an overture by the North to the United States. Our Han Da-eun tells us more.
Kenneth Baes, who's been detained in North Korea for 11 months now, reportedly met with his mother, Park Geun-hye, on Friday after having gained permission from the authorities for a visit. Japan's Kyodo News Agency says Mrs. Baes reunited with her son in a hospital in Pyongyang Friday morning, where she confirmed that her son's deteriorating health was slightly improving. Mrs. Baes is known to have received prior permission from the U.S. government and hopped on Pyongyang-bound plane from Beijing on Thursday. Kenneth Baes, a Christian missionary and tour operator, was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor by the North Korean regime in May for allegedly plotting sedition. Much of the attention around the visit is focused on North Korea's motives for allowing the reunion, as the reclusive state rarely permits family visits for detainees. Interpretations vary, but most experts agree that Pyongyang is trying to use the case as a bargaining chip to reopen dialogue with the U.S. Some experts have also said that Pyongyang and Washington may have made arrangements for the visit through unofficial diplomatic channels. In August, North Korea invited U.S. envoy Robert King for a visit, and he was widely expected to seek Baes' release. But the North withdrew the invitation soon afterward in protest of a round of South Korea-U.S. joint military drills. 한다은, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, more Korean conglomerates are facing government probes for allegedly evading taxes.
The prosecutors raided the residence of the chairman of Hyoseong Group, one of Korea's biggest firms, while investigators are examining the accounting books of the troubled Dongyang Group. Here's our Yoo Ji-hae with the details.
Prosecutors on Friday raided the headquarters of the country's 26th largest conglomerate, Hyoseong Group, and the home of the conglomerate's chairman, Cho Seok-lee, to seize accounting records. Investigation on the conglomerate began earlier this month after the National Tax Service accused Chairman Cho and two of its aides of plotting tax evasions. The country's tax agency also accused the group of manipulating its accounting books in the past 10 years to cover up the losses occurred in its overseas businesses in the wake of the 1997 Asian financial crisis. In a separate probe, financial regulators are also studying accounting books of the embattled Dongyang Group on suspicion that it illegally arranged intragroup deals to hide financial difficulties of some of its affiliates. An affiliate of Dongyang Group, Dongyang Financial Services, last month filed a revised report on its financial records as it had dropped intragroup deals worth 180 billion won, or roughly $170 million US, and some of its debts in its previous report. The revised report was filed when the group sought court receivership for its affiliates. The recent probes into the country's major conglomerates are part of the President Park Geun-hye administration's campaign to correct their unfair market practices prevalent in the past. Yoo Ji-hae, Arirang News.
In recent months, we have been seeing a series of corporate failures, the most recent one being Dongyang Group, which filed for court receivership or protection for its affiliates last month.
The fall of such indebted firms have highlighted the growth of corporate debts and the need to swiftly put struggling corporations under restructuring programs. Now, for more on the defaults by big firms and what needs to be done to address the predicaments of these companies, we're joined by Dr. Lee Jong-eun, professor of economics at Sejong University. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Professor, the debts of the nation's top 30 conglomerates have topped 600 trillion won, or roughly $560 billion. It seems to be a rapid rise. Are we in a very serious situation here?
Well, actually, the financially distressed firms are nearly 180. The proportion of large firms are increasing since 2010 from 5.4% to 10.6%. So this is exactly reflecting on the financial market. So the risky exposure of our domestic banks now amounts to 48 trillion won.
That's quite a lot. So why are these corporations taking on so much debt?
Actually, they are dealing with two huge merger and acquisition activities. Actually, this is a good growth strategy under favorable economic conditions, but now it's quite difficult, the sluggish global economy, and also the aftermath of the bank lending practices. Since the financial crisis, our banks expand their lending to large firms at the expense of small and medium firms because they want to avoid credit risk.
Well, with our nation's economy so heavily dependent on our nation's conglomerates, failure at one particular firm not only affects their investors in that company, but affects the overall fiscal soundness of the nation. Do we see ourselves with more or less buffers from these types of failures?
Well, I hope so, but I think it's always painful if some firms are in bankrupt, even the conglomerates, because they are directly related to our employment market. So I don't think we have a much greater buffer since the Asian financial crisis.
So what safeguards can be implemented at this point from the Korean government?
Actually, financial authorities, they should see the broader picture of the Korean financial market, or even with the external factors, especially for the commercial papers like CP. They might not supervise this because it's not under their coverage, but they should see overall. Also, the rule of law should be penetrating. I think that this is a strong point of the Park Geun-hye administration. But I think the embezzlement, window dressing in accounting or tax dodging, they are all well specified. But some trust things like breach of trust, this is not well specified. So this rule of law should be more acceptable to everybody.
Are these corporate failures perhaps a sign of a turning point in the Korean economy where we're going to see fewer large conglomerates dominate the market and the rise of more of these small and medium-sized enterprises?
That's a very good point. I think this sound ecosystem, the business sector, is very important because it is related to more resilient employment market. So, but we also see the surge of the affiliates actually under conglomerate groups. That's why they failed to deal with these M&A deals because they didn't focus their resources on the most promising market. So we see the both sides. Some are just increasing, they are expanding their firms, affiliates, subsidiaries. But at the same time, as you said, number of small and medium-sized firms are increasing. So at this time, I think we need entrepreneurship rather than animal spirit.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Yi, for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report, less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on the news, trying to cover up the South's true intentions. The winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize has been announced in a decision that caught many by surprise. The Oslo-based Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons won the award. Arirang Yoo Ji-hae has more on the global chemical weapons watchdog.
The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or the OPCW, was named the winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize on Friday. The global chemical weapons watchdog, backed by the United Nations, is overseeing the destruction of Syria's chemical weapons. While the watchdog was established to eliminate all chemical weapons worldwide, its mission was underscored in August after a sarin gas strike in the suburbs of Damascus killed more than 1,400 people.
Recent events in Syria, where chemical weapons have again been put to use, have underlined the need to enhance the efforts to do away with such weapons.
It was the second straight year that the Norwegian Nobel Committee decided against picking an individual person for the honor. The European Union won the Nobel Peace Prize last year. The OPCW, set up in 1997, is based in The Hague in the Netherlands and has about 500 staff members with an annual budget of under $100 million. Before Friday's announcement, Malala Yousafzai, a 16-year-old Pakistani schoolgirl, was considered the odds-on favorite to win the prize. She was shot in the head by the Taliban a year ago for demanding education for girls. The Peace Prize, worth $1.25 million, is presented each year on December 10th in Oslo on the anniversary of the death of its founder, Swedish industrialist Alfred Nobel. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
And here's the latest on the U.S. fiscal fight. The White House says no decision has been made on raising the U.S. debt ceiling. Hopes are rising for a breakthrough in a political impasse following talks between President Barack Obama and top Republicans on a short-term fix to avoid a debt default. So is Congress nearing a deal? Kim Young-gil tells us more.
President Obama and House Republican leaders emerged empty-handed from a meeting Thursday on how to deal with the government shutdown and extending the U.S. debt ceiling. 20 Republicans, including House Speaker John Boehner, were at the White House to propose a 6-week increase in the nation's $16.7 trillion debt ceiling as a way to stave off the country's first-ever default. The proposal outlined by Boehner would maintain a partial government shutdown while Republicans and Democrats negotiate broader budget and spending issues. Obama had demanded the Republicans both reopen the government and raise the government's debt limit at least for a short period of time as a precondition to sitting down at the bargaining table. Republicans seem to be steering clear of the restrictions on Obama's healthcare reforms and spending that prompted the crisis in the first place. Instead, both sides are negotiating on how far to extend the debt limit and how much funding they would provide the government when it reopens. After the meeting, the White House said the president looks forward to making continued progress with members on both sides of the aisle, but added the Republicans have yet to propose a specific bill. The president wants to quickly end the government shutdown that began on October 1st. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
People in Seoul get ready to pay more for taxi rides. Starting tomorrow morning, the base fare goes up 25% to 3,000 won, or close to $3. Connie Lee has more on the new taxi rates.
Hailing a cab is about to get pricier in Seoul. Starting 4 a.m. on Saturday, the base fare for taxis will increase to 3,000 won, or about $2.80. This is up 25% from the current 2,400 won, or about $2.20. The fares for deluxe taxis and van taxis will also go up by 500 won to 5,000 won, or to about $4.60. This is the first time in 4 years that taxi fares in Seoul are going up, following an outcry from taxi operators who said that current fares did not match inflation. Yet some taxi drivers say that the fare hike is still not enough.
The basic fare is increasing, but realistically, it does not help relieve our financial woes.
In addition to the hike in the base fare, passengers traveling by taxi between Seoul and 11 surrounding cities, including Ilsan and Pundong, will be charged an extra fee. This extra charge was abolished in 2009. But the Seoul city government is reintroducing it as part of its response to the taxi companies. The city says it hopes the price hike will enhance taxi services all around the city. The last time there was a fare hike was back in 2009, when the base fare went from 1,900 won to the current 2,400 won. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
A global conference pertaining to the pending issues on cyberspace is slated to take place next week here in Seoul, ranging from ways to promote capacity development to beefing up cybersecurity. Our Hwang Sung-hee gives us a preview of the Seoul Conference on Cyberspace 2013.
Earlier this year, the computer networks at major South Korean banks went into simultaneous shutdown mode, paralyzing bank machines across the country. The suspected culprit behind the incident was North Korea, as it had earlier warned of a sophisticated strike on the South amid an escalation in inter-Korean tensions. Such cross-border cyber attacks are now commonplace, and to discuss ways to bolster international cooperation in dealing with cyber terrorism, around 1,000 IT experts from more than 90 countries will gather in Seoul next week. Under the theme of global prosperity through an open and secure cyberspace, the Seoul Conference on Cyberspace 2013 will focus on 6 main issues: economic growth and development, socio-cultural benefits, cybersecurity, international security, cybercrime, and developing nations' capacity building. The organizing committee for the upcoming gathering says this year's meeting will differ from previous meetings, as it's the first time that developing nations have been invited.
In order to effectively use information and communication technology, a country needs the technology necessary for ensuring cybersecurity. We will discuss ways to share and deliver our technology to developing countries.
The annual conference is the third of its kind after previous meetings in London and Budapest. The British government founded the International Forum in 2011 in an effort to seek common ground across countries on major issues related to cyberspace, such as cybercrime and the social benefits of the internet. On the last day of the meeting, the participants will adopt a so-called Seoul principle, which will serve as a guideline for effectively dealing with the darker side of cyberspace. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
3 contemporary ballet pieces by legendary French choreographer Roland Petit will be showcased by the Korean National Ballet this weekend. They include Petit's adaptation of Carmen, which is one of the most talked about pieces in the history of ballet. Our Park Ji-won takes us to the scene.
The Korean National Ballet presents 3 beloved masterpieces by the late French choreographer Roland Petit this weekend in A Night with Roland Petit. The Young Man in Death is one of the dance maker's most popular and well-known pieces for intense imagery and enticing plots that show the young man's agony and desire. Seasoned dancer and Professor Kim Yong-gal, who was the first Asian soloist at the prestigious Paris Opera Ballet, plays the role of the young man. This piece was made in 1946 when Roland Petit was only 22, but its artistic value and modernity still resonate with contemporary audiences. The 45-minute ballet Carmen is another representative masterpiece by the late French genius. When the work was premiered in London in 1949, the piece created a sensation for its unconventional choreography and elaborate sets and costumes.
This ballet is different from other classical ballets, as it features unique costumes and sets and other elements of spectacle.
This production is the same as a previous one that the National Ballet Company brought to the stage back in 2010 under the direction of Roland Petit himself. But this is the first time the company will perform the work since the choreographer's death in 2011. The production will be held at the Seoul Arts Center's Opera Theater through Sunday. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, after a day off, the KBO Round 1 playoff series between the Nexon Heroes and Tusan Bears resumed at Tamsil Stadium in Seoul on Friday night.
And Stephen Che joins us from the Sports Center to give us the recap of the game. Stephen.
Hey guys, with the Heroes a game away from advancing to the next round, the crosstown rivals clashed in the all-important Game 3 of the series. It's Oh Jae-young for Nexon on the mound, No Kyung-eun for Tusan. In the first, it's the Bears' Kim Hyun-soo's sac fly coming right here to score the first run. It's 1-0. Now they try to add one in the fourth. Tusan's Choi Jun-seok's called double is ruled a home run. Then next batter, Hong Sung-hoon slams one to left field. It's 3-0 Bears. Now we try to go on to the seventh right here. It's Kim Min-sung with a 3-run shot of his own. The game is tied 3-3. This one goes on into extra innings where it is right now with the scores tied 3-3 in the bottom of the 13th with Tusan at bat. Moving on, it's time for one of the most anticipated football matches of the year for football fans in Korea. South Korea and Brazil will face off on Saturday evening. It'll be a packed house at the 66,000-seat Seoul World Cup Stadium, as the South Korean men aim to show that they're a force to be reckoned with. Fitness-wise, the Red Devils are looking good, but for the green and yellow, reports say that superstar forward Neymar may sit out due to a hip injury suffered in practice. Anyway, kickoff is at 8 p.m. Saturday, Korea time. And ending off with archery, Yoon Ki earned the top spot in the women's world rankings for the recurve bow. She overtook fellow national Ki Bo-bae for first place. Ki had been atop the women's rankings since August of last year. For the men, Oh Jin-hyuk stayed at number 1, where he's been for over 190 days now. Meanwhile, the new generation of world-class archers, including Kim Ju-won and Jeon Sung-eun, are headed to China for the World Youth Championships on Sunday. That does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
We're seeing some great autumn weather here on the peninsula after a pretty tough week of showers and a typhoon.
For details on the weather, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, can we expect more of the same weather conditions over the weekend?
Yes, we can, Ji-hae. This weekend will be a perfect chance to head out with your family and friends because it is going to be clear and sunny. For details, let's move on to our satellite map. Well, as you can see, we're seeing clear skies across the peninsula due to a high pressure system from China. Now the leaves on Mount Seorak and Mount Tiri are starting to change colors, signaling the start of fall. And it looks like tomorrow we should have gorgeous autumn weather throughout the country with the average daytime high reaching 25 degrees. So enjoy this lovely weather while you can. Moving on to tomorrow's forecast, which should be absolutely nice and sunny. Seoul, Daegu, and Gwangju all hit 24 degrees. Meanwhile, Busan peaks at 25. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju make it to 23 degrees, while Dokdo tops out at 20 degrees. Although it is going to be sunny during the day, morning temperatures will drop to the low teens and strong winds will persist. So please be sure to grab a cardigan before you head out. That's all for now, and back to you, Sean and Ji-hae.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's our broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hae in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.